With Revenant Act 2's buffs to roaming supers, we want to target one of the best roaming supers for Hunter, and that's Silkstrike. Of course does great ad clear damage, but can also be pretty solid on bosses when needed, and this build will take the damage and the uptime to a completely different level. I'm Engineer. For the exotic, we have two options here. One is the exotic class item, Relativism, with Spirit of the Star Eater and Spirit of Galanor. But if you aren't lucky enough to get this exact perk roll, Star Eater Scales, the leg exotic, is also perfectly fine. It has a lot of benefits and does still increase uptime, even though it doesn't have the benefit of Spirit of Galanor. For Star Eater Scales, you can get this by owning Beyond Light and getting it from Rahul with Precision Focusing. With exotic class item, you of course need the final shape, and you will need to either complete Dual Destiny or get it from Zur. And don't forget to attune at Ghost and the Pale Heart so that you can pick one of these perks and have a higher chance of getting it. What this build is focused on is increasing our uptime and then also increasing our damage. Both Spirit of the Star Eater and Star Eater Scales will let you increase your damage after you collect orbs after you've already gained your super. You get stacks of Feast of Light, which stacks up to 6 times. And you can note the increasing damage that tops out at 70%. But at 3 stacks, you're already up to 54.6%, which is pretty solid. Generally, I always recommend trying to get to at least 3 stacks. If you're ad clearing with pretty weak enemies, you don't really need any stacks. Pop it as soon as you can. But that maximum stack can be really good for intensive boss damage, but 3 stacks is still usually plenty. Now, Star Eater Scales has the benefit of increasing the super energy gain from picking up orbs. It adds an additional 2% from each orb, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're making a lot of orbs, it adds up pretty quickly. On the exotic class item though, we could use Spirit of Galanor, and what that does is it refunds up to 50% of your super energy depending on how much damage you deal and how many enemies you kill. If you consistently land hits on a boss or just kill a lot of enemies, you will typically get a full 50% of your super back, and that's fantastic. As for stat priorities, you're pretty flexible here because hunters use a lot of different stats. Your priorities though would be resilience, discipline, recovery, and then maybe some strength and some intellect if you need it. On to the aspects and abilities. We're going all in on our dodge, because what we want to do here is make as many orbs as possible, regardless of which exotic we use. We want to be dodging and using a melee, which is combination blow in this case, to just consistently make orbs. So we're going to take Winter's Shroud. It creates a slowing field and gives you damage resistance as soon as you dodge. And then as you slow enemies, it'll increase the ability regeneration rate, but we don't really need that in this build. But it's good as a fallback in case you need it. And then we take Threaded Spectre. So also on those dodges, you're going to create a Shadow Clone. And it's going to take so much aggro, it's almost like you're invisible. And because we're using combination blow, you're going to consistently have your dodge back and you can have multiple clones up. Those clones will explode, deal damage to enemies, and just generally be pretty solid. And it does have some penalties to class ability regeneration speed when you have Threaded Spectre, but because of combination blow, we don't care about any of these. So that's a really solid setup. Now your grenade, it's pretty flexible, but I generally recommend Grapple Grenade because your melee mods will actually work with it too, such as Orb Generation or Super Generation based on melee kills. Mentioned it before, our melee's combination blow. It's our fastest, best infinite looping thing to just consistently put out orbs non-stop so we can get our super back. And then for our class ability, we of course want Gambler's Dodge to get that super back. For our class ability, we want Gambler's Dodge so that we can get our melee back and just continue that loop endlessly. Onto our fragments, we're going to take Protection and Purpose for our defenses. Protection is just flat damage resistance when there's enemies near you. Purpose will give you Woven Mail when you pick up an orb. And then we're going to take Bravery and Dawn to give us a little bit of weapon damage. I usually focus on the strand side of Bravery, which helps a bit. And then Dawn will give you Radiant every time you punch something, which is literally all the time. At the end, we want to take Facet of Courage so we can do a little bit more damage with that combination blow just by debuffing enemies, which we do every single dodge. And then we also want to take Facet of Blessing, which is really, I think, kind of a sleeper pick that really just helps keep you alive as you're consistently getting those melee kills. I tried this without this and then I put it on and it was night and day difference and it became really, really hard to actually get killed by enemies. All right, I want to talk about mods and armor stats. This build is purely focused on as much super regen and orb generation as possible. So we're going to take Hands On the helmet, we're going to take a Siphon mod depending on what weapon we take, we're going to take Power Preservation. Power Preservation will make more orbs when you get kills during your super for your teammates, but hopefully they return the favor. And generally it's just great for team play. On your gauntlets, you're going to take 3 heavy-handed mods because that reduces the cooldown from 10 seconds with one mod all the way down to 1 second. So every second you can combination blow an enemy, get an orb out of it. Chest is for damage resistance. We're not doing much else with that. On legs, we're just trying to get some ability energy back, mostly grenade energy because we're not covering that with our gameplay loop. And fortunately, grapple grenade has a flat gain factor of 87.5%, so it'll get most of the value of this. We're also going to take recuperation so that each of those orbs we're making heals us a little bit. And then on the class item, we're going to take powerful attraction, which I think is extremely important in this build to pull in all those orbs as you're dodging around. And we're going to take 2 copies of Reaper so that when we dodge, our next weapon kill after that will give us an orb. And with 2 copies, the cooldown for that is down to 5 seconds. For stats, it's pretty standard. Boost resilience, boost discipline, get as much recovery as you can. Everything else, just try and keep about 30 so you don't get a penalty in it in case you do break your loop somehow. For weapons, I briefly just want to talk about super energy generation. There are a lot of builds going around talking about getting supers in 15 seconds and stuff. Super generation is generally just based on how much damage you deal. If you deal damage faster, you get your super a little bit faster, and that's really solid. So if you want to get your super pretty fast, primary weapons will be the most efficient at it. Ability damage is also very effective though. The biggest thing is if you go to a special weapon, they get a little bit less efficient, and the factors are not exactly known because it's extremely hard to measure. Heavy weapons are a lot less efficient. So when you can, try and use a primary weapon. Exotic weapons also get a 40% buff and damage to red bar enemies, so they'll do really great DPS against them. So if you want to get your super faster, just do high DPS, but really just the damage you do will be converted to super energy. It's not that much to worry about, so if you find something that works with your build, I recommend that over just using whatever somebody on YouTube tells you. I will say too, in the exotic kinetic primaries, we have some really good options. Kinetics do also a little bit more damage for being kinetic. So you have Kavasta, which does some good AoE damage because of the ricochets. You have Bad Juju, which can do some explosions and gives you super energy on kills. There's also just Outbreak Perfected, so if you're at a boss or something, you can do really consistent damage and get that super back because it just pumps out really good damage with all the nanites. Now, if for some reason those don't work for you and you want something that's just a little bit more focused on the build, which is generally what I prefer for general play, I recommend a strand weapon because we can get those unraveling rounds from Faceted Bravery. Final Warning is your best exotic primary that fits with this. Very solid. If you want to use a shotgun, which also feels pretty nice, you can get a shotgun with Demolitionist. My personal favorite is Swordbreaker because it creates explosions after melee kills, and that's great. That's from Crota's End Raid. If you just want a different strand special weapon though, the Call from the Pale Heart, which almost everyone has, is also very good and can also get Demolitionist. Keep that grapple grenade just consistently rolling in. On your energy weapon, really anything works. You could also focus on exotic here. Void weapons will work with Faceted Bravery every time you get a grenade kill to give you volatile rounds. Heavy slot, it really just depends on whatever you need for the situation, whatever you need for DPS. Now, I want to get into a little bit of gameplay. So this is a bit of a longer clip, but I just want to show you the super generation. And this is not the super optimized, super fast. It's focused on survival. I'm in a solo situation fighting a lot of melee enemies. And you can just see I'm dodging around, I'm punching, I'm shotgunning, just trying to make those orbs. If you look at the feed in the bottom left, you'll just see orb generated, just constantly. You can also see me completely whiff a few punches here, just because the enemy is a little bit too far away and the lunge didn't feel like working. But you can see, even though there's lots of enemies, they're shooting. Most of them are shooting at the clones, which is just great defenses. You just keep moving, they run right past you, and you just punch them as they go. And then the shotgun gives you a nice little boost of damage thanks to Radiant and then Unraveling rounds. Just keep picking up orbs. Overall, pretty fast. I think the super generation here is about 1 minute. And this is with the exotic class item with Spirit of Galanor and Spirit of Star Eater. If you Star Eater scales, your super generation will actually be a little bit faster coming from fresh. But Galanor will help you after the first super activation. You can see here we're getting close to full on it. Just trying to finish off a few more enemies. Popping out all the orbs. Hop over an orb, get our super. Now we're still just focused on pretty weak adds here, so I just pop the super instantly. One thing about Silkstrike, the spin attack is really fun, but it's actually one of the least efficient ways to use it because it uses more energy. The main melee attack actually has a bit of AoE on it, so if you just use that, you can see it'll pop like 3 enemies at once. Super's over. We made a lot of orbs thanks to power preservation. Not ones we can use, but they're still very helpful. And because of Spirit of Galanor, you can see we have 50% of our super back, so now we just resume the loop. Just keep shotgunning, keep meleeing enemies, and just keep it going. You can see the Cursed Thrall explosions from the origin tree on Swordbreaker here. Really like this gun. And now the boss is up, so we're just gonna throw a Transcendence Grenade at him, just keep him busy, do a little bit of damage over time, and then find some more enemies to make orbs out of. There's an orb. Alright, grab just a couple more orbs so that we can get 3 Feast of Light stacks. There it is. Now we can pop the super and just attack this boss. I jumped in the air. I probably should have stayed on the ground because it's really hard to use this exotic or this super when you're in the air. So we can just whittle him down, just come just short of him. If I got one more Feast of Light stack, probably would have got it. That's it. So just to re-summarize the gameplay loop, dodge near enemies, get a kill with a weapon, get a kill with combination blow, keep dodging, repeat that till your super's charged, then repeat just a little bit more, get Feast of Light times 3 at least, and then pop your super and slay out. And that's the entire build. I hope you've enjoyed it. Feel free to leave any comments below. Tell me what other builds you might like to see. There's so many great ones right now. One thing I'll mention too, Star Eater Scales works with every roaming super on Hunter. It's really fantastic and it's easy to generate because it's based on orbs. So if you're interested in other Star Eater builds, I can at least give you a Mobalytics link and maybe a short guide, but it's really not too complicated. So I recommend you try it out on all the classes. That's what I've been doing. That's all I've got for now. Have a good one.